Jan Kirsch is a doctor specializing in internal medicine, medical oncology, and hematology. She's a speaker on nuclear war and environmental issues with Physicians for Social Responsibility, and has served as its New York City chapter president. She's also the coordinator of the 350 Bay Area Speakers Bureau and San Francisco Bay Area chapter leader for the climate mobilization. Welcome, Jan.
Thank you very much for making that announcement too, which I know I would have forgotten. And I'm sorry that we've been advertising throughout everybody's talk. That wasn't meant to happen exactly that way. So if you're in a hospital and you hear the operator, page overhead, stat, do you know what that means? So it's from Latin, statum, from Latin means right now. You really have to put down your coffee and do whatever you need to do if you hear the operator or a nurse or a doctor. Okay. Then you really have to go to action. The word's code. Have you ever heard that? And somebody's like, okay, so it can mean, there are a number of colors. Code blue means a cardiopulmonary arrest. Pre-designated team of responders, they go quickly because this is an emergency, a real emergency, a 4-minute kind of emergency. Code red, which I'm going to be speaking a lot about today, means there's a fire. And yes, there is. And why am I saying stat and fire? I'm sticking, Penny was nice enough to give us a global picture. Actually, both of our speakers were. I'm going to stick close to home because there is so much happening globally. And yes, it is happening at an urgent, emergent basis. So this is a photo I took a couple of years ago, and that is the coast off Mendocino. Right now it is not involved in fires, but I think most of you know that the Mendocino fire complex fire is raging still, and part of that, along with the Carr fire and the Ferguson fire and all the other fires, is the reason today has been the haziest day I've ever seen in San Francisco since the fog has seemed to dissipate during my lifetime. Sorry, everything's kind of wavy here, so it's the screen, but I like the effect actually. A few years later, I started noticing, this was about 4 years ago, I started noticing these incredible sunsets taken from Berkeley, and obviously that's Alcatraz, and I'm thinking, where is that coming from? Where the hell is that coming from? And in fact, hell was an appropriate word, because we weren't yet seeing the smoke, but we were seeing those kinds of beautiful, hellish, it turns out, effects, which leads me to talk about this, and not just me. You heard Penny say it too, and many scientists, and we could put up a lot of scientific reports, a lot of peer-reviewed literature to tell you that everything is proceeding faster than predicted. This is an emergency. We do not have many decades to fix it. At least we have to make a big impact within the next 3 years. Because climate change is quite simply the greatest public health threat that humankind has ever faced, period. Sure, there's a binary event, nuclear war, that could do us in too, but this one is just progressing apace. If left unabated, it is more, well, that's an important part, if left unabated for a long enough time. Well, I always say that climate change, climate disruption, I like to refer to it that way too, because climate change sounds like something normal, like menopause, and it's not. Climate disruption has the potential, and is likely, if left unabated, will, if left unabated, cause the collapse of civilization and the extinction of much of the natural world, including you and me. We have to agree that that's not a very good day for public health. So this is the reason I make that statement. I often am as brash as to say that it makes the bubonic plague look like a really, really bad rash. Now, I don't mean to dismiss the number of lives taken. What was 50% of medieval Europe were taken out by that. But extinction lasts a long time. And yet, I would not be here today if I thought there was no hope. See, I got 1.5 pounds of Oreo cookies at home, and I can binge watch the Real Housewives of Berkeley or whatever. But I'm here rather than doing those incredibly delightful things because I know we do have a chance. But we have to act quickly. Even one of the architects of the Paris Agreement, which didn't go far enough, but it was good, Cristiana Figueres, said that a year ago that we have 3 years to start making a huge impact. So that's why 350 Bay Area wants drastic cuts with environmental justice, with just transition. Just repeating what I already said, the head of the Lancet Commission, highly prestigious English medical journal, although, of course, the New England Journal of Medicine, though younger, is better. No, I'm not really. And you all know, you could give me an elevator talk on what causes climate change, thickening of that little ring around the Earth by greenhouse gases, which includes things like carbon dioxide, methane, even water vapor, black soot, and some refrigerants and some more rarefied the oxides of nitrogen, especially nitrous oxide. By the way, I wanted to get some Cool Whip, with the Oreos and Cool Whip, I'm sorry. And I noticed that as the propellant, it had nitrous oxide. I don't know if it makes one laugh, but that's dangerous. Okay, so how are those things getting there? In terms of all 110 million tons, every 24 hours, man-made crap, we're turning the atmosphere into a sewer. And that's what's happening, and it's not getting better, and we've worked, and I'm not saying that our work has done nothing. It's certainly not, and 350 Bay Area, for instance, works on many campaigns, but we have to work harder, even than we are now, which is pretty hard. And we have to get in more people's faces, and we have to understand that this is an emergency. This is just, you've probably seen this, the Keeling curve, the graph before, where you go back many hundreds of thousands of years using ice cores and other surrogate measures until the last 180-something years, and then you can actually measure directly. But not CO2, but the CO2 more recently. But carbon dioxide, when that's what's on the ordinate, that's what's on the vertical, that the carbon dioxide you're seeing, we human beings, and even for the 400,000 years before there were Homo sapiens, we used to 180 to 280 parts per million, sometimes maybe up to 300, and then dropping down to the very cold. And we survived an ice age. We survived it, we did. And then where you start to see, just when you start to see the uptick, that is the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. And then it rapidly goes up. And if you saw the first version of An Inconvenient Truth, you saw that ladder going up, up, up. That's how much carbon dioxide. And we're not even necessarily talking methane there. So that's how rapidly the Earth has never, in at least 66 million years, has never warmed that quickly. Probably never has. And the last, the hottest years all occurred in this Earth's history through surrogate and direct measurements have been since 2001. 2016 was the hottest so far, 2017 is second, and I believe 2018 will be hotter. This is Jack, who's in the back, will recognize this, but it needs to be updated. But what he does is something I can't do. He takes all these data, because he's an engineer, our transportation expert, and manages to show when we'll get to 1.5 degrees centigrade. And this was months ago, and it looked like it would be about 2030. Look, there's something I want to say about that 1.5 degrees Celsius and that 2 degrees Celsius. The first, I didn't say. The first, James Hansen, the famous climatologist, said. And that is that using 2 degrees Celsius as a safety, as that's the safety point. You can burn 565, gigatons of fossil fuels, and as long as we don't go to above 2 degrees Celsius, we're safe. Using that is a prescription for disaster, because folks, we're at about a little bit above 1 degree Celsius, possibly as high as 1.2, in general overall increase in temperature. How well are we doing? So even at the 1.5, which we're kind of committed to because of the inertia in the system, even at that 1.5, we're going to have lots of trouble. We are having lots of trouble now. Our frickin' state is on fire. About the other extreme weather events, like I said, in order that I don't have to keep talking like a chipmunk, I trained in New York, so I can speak kind of quickly. But the lady's got the timing sign. So the hurricanes, that, yes, in Europe, record heat waves. We know what's happening in Kerala, India. Thousands of people have died, and it could have been millions, and it may be in the future. And everybody's losing their glaciers. I spent my deformative years in a place called Bakersfield, California, and there were some great people there, but this was a place where I used to swim, enough said. The drought in California is caused, of course, by increased evaporation from a heating planet. What I say now, a simple way of putting it is this, is that how do you make a firestorm? They've happened. Santa Rosa, the car fire, I believe there have been some going on in the Mendocino complex. It took a lot of work in not exactly what I would call a very good endeavor. In fact, an ugly endeavor. And that was the carpet bombing of Germany to force their defeat in World War II. Number one, it didn't work. It made them more resolute. It was the indiscriminate bombing of people and places in order to try to win the war. What it did do on only 2 occasions, despite the intensive carpet bombing everywhere, what it did do was cause in Dresden, Slaughterhouse 5, in Hamburg, it caused these firestorms that created an enormous, their own weather systems that sucked up hot air into them. They grew, and as you know, buildings and whole communities went up in seconds, and that's exactly what is going on now in this state, and it's getting worse every year. This is a picture of there are so many of the Mendocino complex. This is the ranch fire. We're now at 400,000. It's partially contained, but it is not by any means put out, and that's why that's one of the places the smoke is coming from. That was the Mendocino Complex ranch fire. This is the car fire, with appropriately a car. People got out just barely in time. And this is really a sin against all of nature. It's horrible. So Yosemite, the Ferguson fire, not as big, but these are places of beauty, of grace, and I believe of holiness. All the world is. This is what NASA, a picture they took of our state like a couple days ago. And you can see we're freaking on fire, and this did not used to happen. I ask you, how many people remember seeing this kind of smoke 4 years ago? Living through, and it's dangerous. And I want to there was a request made, maybe we'll do it on panel, to answer a question about how in a relatively inexpensive and not too energy, that with fairly low use of energy, one can protect themselves, but it's not a way to solve this problem. This is Santa Rosa from last year. Just to demonstrate what's left behind after a firestorm. And except for the make of cars and the layout of the city, Dresden looked pretty much like that. It's horrifying. And these homes, literally, and other structures went up in seconds in many cases. There's lots of money's lost. So this is in 2017 from the East Bay, and this is this year, a different shot. And that did not used to happen. Walnut Creek this year. These N95 masks, they're not really a great thing to have to wear all the time. In the appropriate situations, if you're working outdoors or spending a lot of time outdoors, it may be a good idea. I'm going to skip the hydrologic cycle. You basically know that what's happening in climate change is not that, well, the important point I want to make here is that flooding does not cure a drought. The California, and when fracking Governor Brown said in 2016, the drought's over. I don't believe he's that clueless, because the forces behind the drought are continuing. I'm getting these looks like, you're Dr. Doom. But flooding doesn't cure drought. What happens is the water runs off. It doesn't stay in aquifers. It actually destroys soil, and which is a good place to sequester CO2. So this is just a little bit of LA that never had happened before. That was record. And San Jose doesn't usually look like that. I don't know, I would expect that's a record. And I wanted to make this point that you can have droughts and fires alternating within a period of a few months of each other. So remember the Oroville Dam, it's near Marysville in that region, and it nearly broke. It nearly breached, but they released water. 200,000 people were evacuated. We nearly had to evacuate the hospital in which I was working. At the last minute, didn't. But that was from flooding. And 6 months later, this is a place near Oroville. So 5 minutes, oh my God, okay, she's gonna move fast. So what I'm inviting all of you to do is to understand a little bit. You know that climate change has already been alluded to a bit, can cause a lot of problems, including famine, which you have to admit is a health problem, and other waterborne diseases. And the smog is very dangerous. Second only to particulate matter is ozone, which causes respiratory condition, which causes a lot of exacerbations. In fact, it can even cause asthma in children. There's a 3.3 times higher likelihood in a great study done, American Journal of Pediatrics, of kids developing asthma who live in high ozone layers compared to those who don't. But the biggie, and volatile organic, tons of crap that causes cancer that's the quick way I'm going to say it, come out of refineries, come out of the burning of fossil fuels, and the burning of other structures too, like was happening during the fires. Particulate matter is very interesting, and I want to at least spend a minute on that. So, and you need to know about these. These fine particulates, they are between 10 millionths of a meter in length. You can't really see them. And they are as small as 0.3 millionths of a meter in length, size of a virus. And you can, in fact, in a pinch, during the fire season, protect yourself from that. And I'd hope to address that on the panel. Somebody should ask me. There are ways of using HEPA-type filters to do that, and inexpensively, too. But these fine particulates are absorbed through taken into the lungs, absorbed through the alveoli into the bloodstream, where they do cause cancer, especially cancer of the lung. They cause hypertension and therefore stroke. They can cause or exacerbate heart disease. They can cause or exacerbate lung disease. And they've been strongly implicated in dementia. They get past the blood-brain barrier. So this crap in the air, even the stuff that's just the smoke that you can't see, is poisoning us right now. Stat, code red. So the solutions, we can get there, actually. Within a few decades, we could get to 100% renewables, and we can work on drawdown. That we can start off with simple things like biochar, like planting more, trees, and having a peaceful, and I hate to use this word, Manhattan Project, to figure out ways, industrial ways, because they don't exist yet. Yet they're in the IPCC, they're in the conservative scientists' plans about how we're going to deal with this, to draw down carbon in a safe way that doesn't involve hurting anyone. Why are we doing this? This has already been alluded to. Have these types of movements ever worked? Taking to the streets, coming out with us, and marching? Of course they have. For ending slavery, yes, there was a little violence eventually needed at that one, and we don't plan to have a violent action. But even the Martin Luther King, the Gandhian action, the peaceful resistance, even that has been extremely powerful. And yes, you can't let your politicians do it, because they won't. We all remember Frederick Douglass, power concedes nothing without a demand. And we're going to be out there demanding. And it's not just worked for them, it's worked more, in my generation, people were fighting a vile war in Southeast Asia. The soldiers weren't vile, but the war was. And people relentlessly in the street, frequently and relentlessly. And that's the key. Even more recently, people were being murdered essentially by the government. People who had HIV/AIDS, they didn't even know it was called HIV at one point. But Ronald Reagan would not mention it. They took to the streets, and then we got action, and we started getting the drugs that have saved the lives, that's keeping some of my friends and yours alive to this day, the highly effective antiretroviral therapies. And they even closed down the New York Stock Exchange for a day, which I think is good for a lot of reasons, but that was just something they did. And there's other campaigns we're going through. This shows you a march on Washington about climate change recently, and we had a sister march around Lake Merritt. It's a big lake, so there were a lot of people. And this is the famous 2014 climate march, and that's the sound saying, I gotta shut up. But I want to invite you, because now the time is stat. You are first responders. Come and let us heal ourselves. Thank you.